Hello, it's Friday, the 20th of January, 2023. Once in a while, we're privileged to witness a televised event so extraordinary, it becomes part of our shared heritage. Who am I kidding?
I believe there are 14 movies left in this box, so yeah, let's take a look. Right, the story of Adele H. I completely forgot that I bought a LaserDisc of this, but I'm very glad I did. Okay, so this is a 1995 LaserDisc from United Artists. We can see that that's the 1990s United Artists logo there. Okay, so the story of Adele H. This is a movie from 1975, a French film from 1975, directed and co-written by Francois Truffaut. Yeah, so several years ago, watched. I started getting into the films of Francois Truffaut. I actually went on a bit of a mad binge. I watched every single feature film Truffaut directed, and I just came to the conclusion that Truffaut is an absolute genius. He rapidly escalated to my list of favorite filmmakers. So this film was released in 1975. And I think it's been said, and it's a fairly plausible contention that most, if not all, of Truffaut's films are about the incompatibility of human relationships. Sometimes Truffaut plays it for comedy, other times he plays it for tragedy. This very much falls into the tragedy side of things. So the movie stars Isabelle Adjani. She was 20 years old at the time. Playing Adele Hugo. So the film is set in 1863, I think 1863. And and Adele Hugo is the daughter of Victor Hugo, the famous French writer who at that time is like one of the most famous people in the world. And Adele is sort of she's kind of she's an aspiring writer, but she's sort of gripped by obsessive feelings towards a French soldier who she had a sort of an affair with. She attached more significance to the relationship than he did. The soldier, incidentally, is played by Bruce Robinson, who was an actor at the time, but later went on to become a screenwriter and a director. Most famously, he wrote and directed Withnail and I. So this is a film. This is a really, really good film about obsessive love. Adele Hugo is obsessed with the soldier Albert, and she's sort of trying to do everything she can to make Albert sort of like reciprocate and fall in love with her. So she like stalks him. She sort of inundates him with letters. She pretends to be his fiance. She pretends to be pregnant, and then he goes off. He goes off to Nova Scotia, Canada. He's posted there, and she follows him and takes up residence. And it's sort of all about her. It's basically a story about 19th century stalking. But Isabelle Adjani is absolutely fantastic in this movie, where she just descends further and further into insanity. Adele's sister died, and Adele sort of has like very haunting dreams of her drowning sister, and at times she sort of comes to believe that she is her dead sister. And it's there's a lot of narration by her character, all her fanciful longings and her sort of deranged romantic longings about this man that she's chasing. And it's really it's a very beautifully made film. I think Truffaut sort of saw a nobility in Adele's her commitment, her self-righteousness, even though she can't see that the man that she's in love with is kind of a cad. He's not a bad man. He's just a mediocre one, and he's completely, undeserving of her attention. But it's really dispiriting. This movie, the way it goes, just seeing Adele just gradually become more and more insane and disheveled. She succumbs, more and more to her insanity, and the movie it ends on a very bleak, ironic note. So Isabelle Adjani, I imagine this would have been the first time that international audiences saw her, and she's amazing in this film. She was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress. She was 20 years old. I think she was the youngest Best Actress nominee ever at that time. She didn't win. She was beaten by Louise Fletcher for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But yeah, this is an amazing film. It's a really good movie. It's very well written and directed, beautifully acted. It just looks fantastic. And it's a very evocative film. It's one of Truffaut's darker films. He did make other films that are all about obsessive love. I think Two English Girls was one. The Woman Next Door was another. Yeah, this is a sort of movie that a lesser filmmaker would have made a right hash of it. I think Truffaut deals with it quite sensitively. So even though Adele is descending further and further into delusion, the sort of her brilliant imagination and her sort of emotional instability, sort of bringing her down. The film it does treat her very sympathetically. There is actually a particularly low key heartbreaking sequence in the movie where when it's in Nova Scotia, there's sort of a bookstore owner or a stationery store owner who is sort of sweet and friendly, and he sort of has a bit of a crush on Adele, and when he finds out who she is, that she's Victor Hugo's daughter, he gives her like paper and like stationery supplies and things because he thinks that she would like that, and she kind of misinterprets and she lashes out at him, and it's kind of it's a sort of a difficult scene to watch. For what my opinion is worth, I think Isabelle Adjani is one of the most beautiful women to have graced the movies, and her luminous beauty, it is showcased, very well in particularly the European films she made in the 1970s. This film and the 1979 version of Nosferatu, directed by Werner Herzog. So this is a French language film with Japanese subtitles, so it's not suitable viewing for a distressingly monolingual person such as myself. But that's okay. I do have this movie on DVD with English subtitles. Here's a laserdisc of Platoon, a film I already have on laserdisc. So several months ago, I didn't have any laserdiscs at all, and now I'm at the point where I seem to be buying multiple laserdiscs of the same movie. Okay, so the other copy that I had was an American one. This is a Japanese one. So this is a 1988 laserdisc of Platoon from RCA Columbia Pictures. So it uses the standard image that we saw on the film's poster and most of the VHS releases. So there's not really much more I can say about Platoon that I didn't say in the previous video where I had my other copy of it. It's a great film. It's this is the movie that won Best Picture, Best Director for Oliver Stone. The first of I guess an explicit trilogy of 3 movies that deal with the Vietnam War. There was also this is in 1986. Stone then did Born on the 4th of July in 1989 and Heaven and Earth in 1992. Or was Heaven and Earth 93? I can't remember. Anyway, although Vietnam does creep into other films that Stone made, like his 60s oriented films like JFK, The Doors, Nixon, etc. This is a good film. Charlie Sheen plays the naive Chris Taylor, who's signed up to fight in Vietnam, and he's caught between the 2 platoon sergeants that are very different. There's the essentially heroic Sergeant Elias, played by Willem Dafoe, and the brutal and psychotic Sergeant Barnes, played by Tom Berenger. The film has a really, really good cast of then largely unknown young actors, most of whom would sort of go on to become quite famous. You've got John C. McGinley, Kevin Dillon, Johnny Depp, Keith David, Forrest Whitaker. Who else is in this? Francesco Quinn is in this. Yeah, so this is a really good movie, and I really do like this design. It looks pretty good. I was somewhat baffled to discover that in 1987, a year after this movie was released, there was actually a computer game. There was a Platoon computer game, which I don't know. I mean, this was kind of a harrowing drama about America reckoning with its the Vietnam War, and it was I don't know if it was especially appropriate to make a computer game out of it, but who knows. I've neither seen nor played the game. I am curious to know if the game has a synthesized, like digitized version of Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings playing throughout. So in my formative film buff years, I did go through an Oliver Stone phase. I still have a great deal of admiration for a lot of Oliver Stone's stuff, particularly the films he made between 1986 and 1995. I mean, after Nixon, I can't say I'm a huge fan of much of what Stone made since then. aside from Any Given Sunday, I do like that. But I feel that Stone was, I mean, for all his indulgences, he was pretty. I think he was consistently good from Salvador all the way to Nixon, and then he became much more erratic after that. Here's a 1988 Japanese laserdisc from Warner Home Video for In the Heat of the Night, the United Artists released film from 1967, directed by Norman Jewison. Yeah, this is a pretty fantastic movie, and this is a very good looking release. I'll just yeah, so this is the quite famous film involving Sidney Poitier as a homicide detective from Philadelphia who ends up in a small town in Mississippi, and he investigating a murder, and he teams up with a redneck sheriff played by Rod Steiger. Yeah, so in a way, it's kind of this movie is sort of a progenitor of like the later like buddy cop movies, although this is not it's not a comedic film. It's very much a straightforward drama, and it was very timely when it was released in '67. I mean, with the civil rights movement, etc. And it was pretty galvanizing for audiences to see Sidney Poitier playing this really admirable like black guy, this detective that sort of doesn't really take any crap from the racist people that he encounters in this film. So yeah, this is a good film. It was edited by Hal Ashby, who won an Academy Award for editing this movie. Hal Ashby went on, of course, to become a director, directing some of the greatest films of the New Hollywood era in the 1970s. So yeah, this is a pretty good looking release. There were a couple of sequels with Sidney Poitier. There was They Call Me Mr. Tibbs, which I have seen, and there was one called The Organization, which I have not. They Call Me Mr. Tibbs. It's okay, but it has a kind of it doesn't really feel as filmic as this movie. It sort of feels much more like a TV movie cop drama that's been upgraded to a theatrical film. It has that kind of feel to it. And there was in the 1980s there was a television series based on In the Heat of the Night, starring Carol O'Connor, which I never saw that. There are pretty good supporting roles in this movie for Lee Grant and for Scott Wilson. Rod Steiger won an Academy Award for best actor for this. The music score by Quincy Jones is really good too. Very really atmospheric. Yeah, this is a great movie. Another film that I already have on LaserDisc, but I seem to have bought again. This is Blade Runner, the iconic 1982 science fiction film directed by Ridley Scott. The version that I bought previously was the 1989 Criterion Collection edition. This is a 1983 LaserDisc from Warner Home Video. So this is actually another Japanese edition, although unlike most of the other Japanese LaserDiscs I've bought, it doesn't have any Japanese writing on the sleeve, although it does say printed in Japan, and I had a look at the actual disc, and it's got Japanese writing on that. So this was released in 1983, this edition, which is only a year after the movie's original theatrical release. Although this would be the theatrical version. Of course, the Criterion one is the theatrical version as well. There are myriad versions of Blade Runner out there. For my money, the best is the 2007 final cut. Yeah. So that's the John Alvin poster artwork, which has sort of been cropped and fitted into this uniform sleeve design that Warner Home Video used for their LaserDiscs back in the day. I can spot an error in the blurb on this one. It says Los Angeles in the year 2020, when any cinephile or any fan of this film knows that it takes place in November 2019. I'm not especially ill-disposed towards the theatrical version of Blade Runner, which has, come in for it does get a lot of criticism. I think it's handy to watch the theatrical version of Blade Runner at least once. I know that Harrison Ford's narration isn't so hot, but I mean the movie does clarify some plot details that are left deliberately vague in the Ridley Scott's preferred version. So it's kind of worth watching, although it's not by no means do I regard it as the definitive version of the film. I would say the final cut or the director's cut from the early 90s more so than the 1982 theatrical version. This is a 1994 Japanese Laserdisc release of Ordinary People. This is from Paramount Home Video. The movie is from 1980, directed by Robert Redford. It was Redford's first film as director, scripted by Alvin Sargent from the novel by Judith Guest. So Ordinary People, it's an interesting movie. It sort of has... its legacy today is somewhat controversial for reasons which I'll go into. But anyway, the movie it's a sort of a domestic drama, like an upper middle class drama involving like I guess the disintegration of a family unit where you have Mary Tyler Moore and Donald Sutherland as the parents, and Timothy Hutton's their son, who's going through extreme emotional problems and attempted suicide after feelings of guilt after the death of his older brother. Mary Tyler Moore and Donald Sutherland's eldest son, and it's all to do with Timothy Hutton's his rehabilitation, his realization that his mother doesn't actually love him, and then that sort of leads on to Donald Sutherland sort of looking at his wife and realizing that she's kind of not the person that he's no longer in love with her, because she's kind of this matriarch that is sort of repressed, and everything has to sort of be absolutely perfect, and she doesn't tolerate any dissent from order, which means that she's she doesn't really care for her son's obvious problems. And but anyway, so this is a film. It was a huge success, this movie. What happened was it won Best Picture at the Academy Awards. It beat Raging Bull, and that's kind of where in retrospect, it's kind of sort of had a negative impact on this film, because like I think in cinematic discussions, whenever Ordinary People comes up, it's almost always in the context of the fact that it beat Raging Bull for Best Picture. Is it a better movie than Raging Bull? I mean, no. I mean, not many films that year were better than Raging Bull. This certainly wasn't, but it's a good film. It's a bit unfortunate because of the backlash, because it's actually a really well made, very well scripted, well acted movie, and it's quite affecting in its way. But it just has that kind of unearned privilege sort of feeling attached to it, which is a bit unfair. But so we can see this is a very nice gatefold release here. So there's other Timothy Hutton won a Best Supporting Actor Academy Award for this, which was a little bit controversial in itself, because he is the main character. He's in like almost every scene, and yet he won Best Supporting Actor. I think it probably worked out for the best, because had he been nominated for Best Actor, he probably wouldn't have won, because Robert De Niro, and that's when he won for Raging Bull for playing Jake LaMotta. So I think they were probably the studio was probably wise to submit Timothy Hutton for Best Supporting Actor, knowing that he had a better chance of actually winning the Oscar in that category, which is what happened. Elizabeth McGovern is in this as Timothy Hutton's girlfriend. She's good in this, and there's a really good supporting role for Judd Hirsch as Timothy Hutton's psychiatrist. Judd Hirsch he's been one of my favorite actors ever since I got obsessed with the sitcom Taxi. And there's at least one or two episodes of Taxi where Judd Hirsch is barely in it, because he was filming this movie at the time. But Ordinary People, it's sort of there was that kind of era, like in the late 70s, early 80s, when like domestic melodramas were winning Academy Awards. Like we saw this with Kramer versus Kramer in 1979, and then with Ordinary People in 1980. It's a good movie. I think I really do like this movie. I had no idea I was buying this many Laserdiscs of movies that I already had on Laserdisc. So here we have Year of the Dragon, the 1985 Michael Cimino film. I already have a Laserdisc of this. The other copy that I have, I've looked at before. It's a 1986 American Laserdisc from MGM UA Home Video. This is a 1986 Japanese release. This edition has several distribution companies linked to it. We've got Thorn EMI, we've got an outfit called King Video, and we've got another outfit called Toho Koshinsha Home Video. So yeah, a lot of companies involved with this one. So I'm not really going to say much more about Year of the Dragon, because I have dealt with this movie in a previous video. I really like this movie, directed by Michael Cimino, written by Cimino and Oliver Stone. Yeah, Oliver Stone's involvement in this is interesting because Stone had written the screenplay for Brian De Palma's Scarface, and some people have sort of seen this movie as being sort of a kind of a reverse Scarface, because Scarface, of course, follows the immigrant Tony Montana, who moves from Cuba to America and becomes a crime lord, and it's very much his story. Year of the Dragon is it's sort of a similar story, but it's more from the point of view of the law enforcement, because we have the character Joey Tai, played by John Lone, who's a Chinese immigrant to America who becomes a crime lord, but he's very much the secondary character in this. He's the antagonist. Like, the main character is the detective Stanley White, played by Mickey Rourke. So yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, I really do like this film. I think it's underrated, and this is a really good addition, actually. So we'll take a look at it. This actually looks a lot more classy than the American edition that we looked at before. So we can see the dragon motif. It's just the bordering. It just looks really good. And this is one of the things I've mentioned before, is LaserDisc was such a fantastic format just for showcasing artwork. And even we can sort of look here. I mean, look at that. That just looks absolutely great. So we can see Mickey Rourke, and there's Ariane Koizumi, who plays the love interest, the TV news journalist who gets dragged into the vendetta between Joey Tai and Stanley White. Yeah, there's actually, I remember when I first watched this movie, there was a very interesting moment, which I don't know if it's one that's particularly cited by anyone, but so Stanley White, the Mickey Rourke character, he's not really a hero. He's the protagonist of the film, but he's a pretty shady character. He has an affair with Tracy Sue, the character that Ariane plays. Although he is married, and the sequence where Stanley White's wife finds out about her husband's infidelity, it's like in other movies, like, the wife would be sort of be portrayed like as a bit of a shrew, to sort of make audiences find the adultery, the extramarital stuff, like, more palatable. It's like, well, he's got a boring, dowdy wife. But the Year of the Dragon doesn't really do that. It has a scene where Stanley White's wife, she breaks down and cries, and the movie, like, I was like, holy crap, this movie's actually it's dealing with her sympathetically. Like, it's not diminishing her grief. It's not you're kind of on her side. How is the movie going to deal with this? He's sort of stuck in this dilemma. What's Stanley White, what's going to happen? And then a bunch of criminals break into the house and kill Stanley White's wife in cold blood, and it's like, oh well, that's just resolved this whole life triangle situation. Which I'll be honest, it is an unfortunate trope when the suffering of women is contrived in a plot, to provide motivation for the male character. In this case, the murder of Stanley White's wife and the rape of Tracy Sue. But you got to take the bad with the good, I suppose. There's also there are some really good scenes in this movie. There's a shootout in a restaurant that's really well staged by Cimino. There's a very strange moment, actually, in the closing credits, of all things. I think midway through the credits, a Chinese chanteuse like sort of appears on screen and sings. I think she was that character was sort of in the restaurant sequence much earlier. It's sort of a strange thing. A strange thing to see, but but this is a good movie. It's the set design is pretty fantastic. It's got at times it has a very glossy, slick look, like Tracy's apartment, and then at other times it just looks really, really like grungy and dour, like the Chinatown sets that were sort of staged in interior sound stages, which they do look very, very convincing, I have to say. Less convincing is I think Mickey Rourke, like, his character Stanley White, he's supposed to be like a Vietnam vet turned police officer, and I don't know if Mickey Rourke really, like, convinces, like, age-wise as a Vietnam vet. He kind of, they give him they put coloring in his hair, like they've given him kind of white hair, I guess to try and make him look older than he actually is. But it's a bit of a minor flaw. I think it's certainly not enough to derail what I believe is a very good movie. It's got a really, really good climax as well, with Stanley White and Joey Tai just basically charging at each other like insane gun brandishing nutbags. But yeah, it's a it's a good movie, very good movie, very underrated. I think this movie is probably was probably Michael Cimino's last stab at greatness. I don't think any of his films he made after this are especially good. And I do think that if you want to see one 1980s movie about a unhinged cop trying to take down a drug peddling gang lord, this is a pretty good option. Brazil, the 1985 dystopian black comedy movie, directed by Terry Gilliam, of course. So this is a LaserDisc from 1997, I believe. It's a widescreen edition. So yeah, Brazil. Brazil is interesting. It's one of those movies that I seem to recall when I was just sort of coming to regard myself as some sort of cinephile. Brazil is just it was a very important, informative movie. I first saw it. I think I was either late teens or early 20s, but the film it was the very first Criterion collection film I ever got. I got the DVD box set from Criterion, that and The Last Temptation of Christ. Were my two first Criterion purchases. So the film itself, it's really good. It's probably my favorite Terry Gilliam film. I think Gilliam sort of retroactively referred to it as the middle installment of a trilogy, the Trilogy of Dreams or something, which is about the sort of fanciful, like escapist adventures of a person at different ages. So you've got the child in Time Bandits in 1981. You've got Jonathan Pryce's character Sam Lowry in this, who's a man, and then in 1988 you have the Adventures of Baron Munchausen, where you have an old man. So it's kind of the fantasies involving people of three different ages. So yeah, Brazil. It's a really interesting film. Fantastic set design, very imaginative, very off the wall. Great cast, including Robert De Niro is in this. Michael Palin is in this, sort of kind of playing with his like nice guy image. He plays like a brutal interrogator. And Catherine Hellman's in this. Ian Holm, Peter Vaughan, Ian Richardson, Kim Grice. It's a really good cast. The film it's sort of like it's kind of a mashup of Orwell's 1984 and The Secret Life of Walter Mitty and lots of other things. But the end result, it just comes off as a completely original creation because of the very imaginative visuals of Gilliam. So this movie, it had a very controversial release where Universal were like refusing to release it, and there was they didn't like. I think there was a notion that if Gilliam had kept the movie under a certain length, he would have final cut. But because he didn't, because he would insist on reducing the film's length, Universal imposed final cut, and that sort of led to all these sorts of complications. The film was Gilliam's version was screened and won the New York Critics Prize. Gilliam took out a one-page ad in Variety asking Sid Sheinberg, the president of Universal, like, when are you going to release my movie? So there was all this controversy attached to the film. Although that's sort of all like in the past. Like I don't think anyone really, the controversy has sort of subsided, and people now just take the film for what it is, which is a very good movie. I mean, it has it has such a fantastic look, and it's so crazy. I mean, the plot is a bit. It sort of sometimes it doesn't really seem to make sense, but that doesn't matter for the sort of film that this is. And the film, it kind of has a. I guess the ending is sort of. It's a little bit like 1984, but maybe not so pessimistic, because at least in this version of the film, the government bureaucracy sort of can't really. Diminish the dreams of the character, even if the character is becoming diminished. The film, it's interesting. I've heard it posited that the film kind of it takes place. I mean, it's sort of supposed to be in like the near future, but in hindsight, it's almost like it takes place in an alternate 1980s where Britain has become like a satellite of the Soviet Union, because the film the antagonists of the film, it kind of combines the strong arm tactics of the of what in the Cold War was perceived to be the strong arm tactics of the KGB and the Russian state police, etc., with the kind of broken down nothing really works view of Eastern Bloc as well. So it's like a very sort of ramshackle. Everything seems to be cobbled together. You know, there's a heavy emphasis on pipes and ducts and things. Yeah, this is one of those movies where practically every shot is interesting. You know, from the more lyrical, dreamlike fantasy sequences to even the mundane yet amusingly imaginative architecture and set design for all the office work scenes. You know, it's just a movie that just looks really really good. I think for anyone who's been caught up in the convoluted nature of like office work and bureaucracy and such, like, this film kind of it sort of takes that to its nth degree. See the gatefold design here, which looks pretty good. Some cast and crew credits as well. The Criterion edition of Brazil includes several versions of the film, including the infamous quotation marks "Love Conquers All" version, which is the drastically re-edited version of the film that Sid Sheinberg wanted to release in America. So the standard version of Brazil, I think, is like 140 minutes, give or take, and the Scheinberg's edit is like 94 minutes. So it loses a lot of material and has a sort of incongruously happy ending, tacked on. And even though Gilliam was quite, he didn't hold back describing that version. He said it was like a parent looking at an amputated child, or he said something like that. He did consent to have that version included in the Criterion set. So it's worth looking at just as an exercise to see, how a studio can try to release a severely compromised version of a film. That being said, I think over the years, Gilliam's whole shtick of being the imaginative maverick genius that's up against the soulless corporate suits. I think that eventually got kind of tiresome. But Brazil is one case where his instincts were correct, and I think his battle with the studio was justified. There is a particularly good book about the making of the movie and the troubled production and release by Jack Matthews called "The Battle for Brazil," which is definitely worth reading if you're a fan of this movie. This is a 1985 Japanese Laserdisc edition of Once Upon a Time in America, the gangster movie directed by Sergio Leone. This was Sergio Leone's last movie as director. So we'll just have a look at this. It looks really good, this one. This is an interesting film. It was kind of, in a sense, it was Leone's response to The Godfather. Like, he wanted to make his own crime epic, and he came across this book. I believe it was called The Hoods, and it was about the relationship between two Jewish gangsters in New York who grow up in Prohibition times, and then as the years go by, they turn against each other, etc. So in the movie, the characters are played by Robert De Niro and James Woods. So the movie, Sergio Leone, he shot, I think he shot like something like 10 hours of footage, and he wanted to release the movie in two parts as like a 6-hour movie, like 2-3 hour movies. That didn't fly, and he eventually assembled a movie that was 230 minutes, so 3 hours 50 minutes, so almost 4 hours long. That's the version of the movie that played in Europe, and it got a really good response at the Cannes Film Festival. In America, the film was heavily edited. It was edited down to I think 140 minutes, so significantly shorter. And they also rearranged the sequences of the film, because the film, there's a sort of an elaborate flashback structure to it, but the American wide release version, they sort of sorted everything into the scenes into chronological order and sort of messed with it, and it was kind of it bombed quite badly. And then I think the original, the full version of the film sort of belatedly got a limited release. Roger Ebert wrote a 4-star review of the movie where he praised Leone's cut of the film and said it was like one of the best movies of the year, but he dismissed the shorter version that had played before as a travesty, and Sergio Leone disowned that version of the movie. It's the full 227-minute version of the film, which is the only version of the film I've seen. It's the version I also have on DVD and VHS. I first became aware of this movie via the VHS release that I saw in video stores in Australia many years ago. And here is a copy of that edition that I was familiar with to begin with. So this is a roadshow home video release from the mid 1980s of Once Upon a Time in America. This is, as you can see, it's a double. It's a double set. Open it up here. It's yeah. I recently bought this copy on eBay. I sort of wanted it for nostalgic reasons because I remember, renting a copy just like this, a couple of decades ago, and it's got some. It's a pretty. It still plays, and it's got some really interesting trailers on it as well. The movie is very expansive in its scope and its narrative. It begins in the sort of the early part of the 20th century, and it sort of goes on to the 1960s. It's got a really good cast. Joe Pesci's in this, Burt Young, Treat Williams, Elizabeth McGovern. There's also a very fleeting appearance by Jennifer Connelly, one of her earliest screen roles. She actually plays the child version of the Elizabeth McGovern character. So yeah, keep an eye out for her. This is a 1990 Japanese laserdisc of Bound for Glory. This was released by Warner Home Video. The movie is from 1976. It's a biopic about Woody Guthrie, the American folk singer. So it's based on Guthrie's autobiography, Bound for Glory. So this movie was directed by Hal Ashby. Ashby was coming. He was sort of in the middle of a pretty great run, Hal Ashby. So he directed, I think it was The Landlord in 1970, Harold and Maude in 1971, The Last Detail in 1973, and then it was Shampoo in 1975, and then Bound for Glory in 1976. So after this came Coming Home in 1978 and Being There in 1979. So that was a pretty fantastic run in the 1970s for Hal Ashby. I mean, pretty much every one of those movies is either great or very near great. Bound for Glory, this is a film, I have seen it. I do have it on DVD. I have watched it. It's been a while, though. I can't really remember too much of it specifically. I remember liking it. David Carradine plays Woody Guthrie, and there's an interesting cast. There's Ronnie Cox is in this. Melinda Dillon is in it. Randy Quaid is in it. He was in The Last Detail, of course. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to say much more about this. It was nominated for a Best Picture at the Academy Awards. It was up against, that was the year that it was up against Network, Taxi Driver, All the President's Men, and Rocky, and that's the year that Rocky won. Another interesting thing about this movie was the Steadicam cinematography by Garrett Brown. He invented the Steadicam, and I think this was the very first motion picture to sort of use the Steadicam for tracking shots. And then after this, it sort of became much more common. One of the greatest movies ever made, Lawrence of Arabia, the 1962 epic movie directed by David Lean. This is a 1993 Japanese laserdisc from Columbia TriStar Home Video. So Lawrence of Arabia, it's a film I have seen, of course. Unfortunately, I've never seen it on the big screen, which is this is one of those movies where, when they say that, you have to see it on big screen, this is definitely one of those films that is absolutely true. So the movie, of course, starring Peter O'Toole, Omar Sharif, and Alec Guinness. I don't really think it's. I think it's sometimes criticized for being, a white savior movie, which I don't really think holds true, because if you watch the movie, like, Lawrence is kind of portrayed as being, a little bit obsessive, like kind of insane. But anyway, that's a debate for another time. So this is the newly restored director's cut in 70mm Dolby. I believe the director's cut was done in the restored version of the film was done in 1989. Steven Spielberg tells a really good story about the restoration of this film. Spielberg had become friends with David Lean. In fact, in the 1980s, David Lean was originally supposed to direct Empire of the Sun, with Spielberg producing, and then eventually Spielberg took over and directed the movie. When Spielberg attended a screening of the restored version of Lawrence of Arabia with David Lean, Spielberg recalls that, like, David Lean was talking throughout the movie, like reminiscing and regaling stories about the making of the film and such like. And Spielberg said it was great. It was like having his own personal director's audio commentary from David Lean, which I think is a pretty cool story. Pretty much everything about this movie is great in all senses of the word. Just the ambition and scale of this the visual spectacle, the grandeur of it. It's such a fantastic movie, huge box office hit. And it kind of, it sort of, it was a big deal at the Academy Awards. It won, I think it was nominated for 10 Academy Awards. It won 7, including Best Picture and Best Director. Peter O'Toole was nominated for Best Actor. He didn't win. He was beaten by Gregory Peck for To Kill a Mockingbird, I believe, which, much as I like Atticus Finch, this is one of the, greatest and most iconic performances in motion picture history. Peter O'Toole in this movie, he really should have got the Academy Award for this one. Peter O'Toole he won an honorary Academy Award like decades later, but he never won an Oscar competitively. I am a big fan of the films of David Lean. I do like his British films, his earlier films, which were sort of smaller scope, like his Dickens adaptations and Brief Encounter. And I do like, when he went to Hollywood, I do like, Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia. He kind of, I think Lawrence of Arabia is probably David Lean's like last indisputably great movie. I mean, he did Dr. Zhivago after this, which is a good movie. But then he did Ryan's Daughter, which is kind of one of those movies where it's okay, but its length doesn't really. I think the story doesn't really justify the epic length. It's kind of like a soap opera that's just bloated and expanded, way to dimensions it doesn't really deserve. And then after that, he did A Passage to India in the 1980s, which is an interesting movie because it's like. In some respects, it feels like a movie out of place. It's a movie there are many good things about the movie, but you've got, Alec Guinness like shuffling across the screen in brownface, and it just feels like, it feels like it's a movie that sort of probably should have been, it's a kind of movie that, would have been okay if it was made in the 50s or 60s, but by the 1980s, it just sort of felt, there were aspects of it that felt a bit old-fashioned, a bit old hat, and that was David Lean's last movie. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Lawrence of Arabia, what can you say? One of the best movies ever made. There are certain movies where if I'm channel surfing and the movie is on, no matter what point of the film it's at, I have to just watch it to the end. Goodfellas is one, Teen Wolf is another one, and All the President's Men is also in that category. This is one of my all-time favorite films. I love this movie. This is the 1976 film adapted by the book by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. This is a 1988 Japanese laserdisc from Warner Home Video. This is a this movie is about the investigation of Woodward and Bernstein into the Watergate break-in, and the events of which would eventually unravel the Richard Nixon presidency and lead to Nixon's resignation in 1974. This is directed by Alan J. Pakula. It's the last part of what Pakula referred to as his Paranoia trilogy, which began with Clute, continued with the Parallax View, and then concluded with this. It's just, unlike those other two movies, this has such a great, like, cagey, nervy, suspense tone to it. I think this movie, it probably inspired a lot of people to become newspaper journalists, because this movie is kind of like the ultimate, I guess, glorification / validation of journalists as, like, crusader types. Even though Woodward and Bernstein in this movie are sort of portrayed as like likable but not always sympathetic. This is such a fantastic cast. Robert Redford plays Bob Woodward. Dustin Hoffman plays Carl Bernstein. Jason Robards won an Academy Award for playing Ben Bradley of the Washington Post, the newspaper that Woodward and Bernstein are working for. You've got Jack Warden, Martin Balsam, Hal Holbrook as Deep Throat. So I've watched this movie many times. I have seen it belatedly on the big screen. I saw it a screening of it several years ago, which I was very happy to attend. I'm sort of anyone who knows me knows that I'm kind of a bit obsessive when it comes to books and materials and stuff on Richard Nixon and Watergate. So this is kind of, this is a movie that's very, very near and very dear to me. So when I put this movie on, and Charles Colson, Howard Hunt, the Plumbers, Donald Segretti, Mitchell, Haldeman, Ehrlichman, the slush fund, Hugh Sloan. I'm just all in, man. This is my jam. Amazing screenplay by William Goldman, who adapted the book by Woodward and Bernstein. The film has that famous line, "Follow the money," which I'm pretty sure isn't actually in the book. It was created for the film.
Forget the myths the meteors created about the White House. The truth is, these are not very bright guys, and things got out of hand.
There's a very lean, suspenseful score by David Shire. In fact, the film it's really good because it sort of in a sense it does a lot with the little, by which I mean it manages to generate like just so much suspense and tension from like just phone calls and just little gestures and little things. Like it's a movie that to me, I think it's as riveting and thrilling as any movie that has like chase scenes and shootings and explosions and things. This film doesn't have any of that. It's all just sort of about the the grunt work of being a newspaper guy, like following leads, making phone calls, bluffing, playing hunches, that sort of thing. There's loads of really good scenes in this movie. Redford and Hoffman are absolutely fantastic as well. If I remember correctly, the billing between Redford and Hoffman, I think on publicity, like posters, etc., for the movie, I think Redford was listed first, but in the movie itself on screen, I think Hoffman gets top billing. So the year that I mentioned before, when All the President's Men, Taxi Driver, Bound for Glory, Network, and Rocky were all up against each other for Best Picture, which movie would I have chosen? Really, really tough call. For me, it would be between All the President's Men and Taxi Driver. I could go either way. I think if you put a gun to my head and made me choose, I think I would have to go for All the President's Men. I can't. I think there's no beating this movie in that year. This is a release from a company called Herald Videogram, which I've never heard of, but it's a film that I have heard of. It's a film I have seen. So this is a 1986 Japanese release, LaserDisc, of La Salaire de la Peur, the 1953 French movie, English title, The Wages of Fear. This is a great movie, directed by the great French filmmaker Henri-Georges Clouzot. So this was a very successful film financially and critically. It's about four European men who are tasked with a hazardous job. They have to transport trucks of nitroglycerin to extinguish an oil well that's caught fire, and of course the cargo is very unstable, so they run the risk of blowing themselves up en route to the oil well. This is a very, very well made film, very suspenseful. It's still 1953, but it still holds up really, really well today. It's just so well made. I have seen the film. I do have it on DVD. It was remade in 1977 by William Friedkin as the movie Sorcerer, which was a movie that was a big box office flop at the time, but has become esteemed in the years since. They're both. It's a rare case of a brilliant movie being remade into another brilliant movie. Oh, one of my childhood favorites, King of Kings, the 1961 biblical film. This is a film about the life of Christ. So when I was a kid, at Easter time, they would always show, biblical movies, biblical miniseries, etc. on TV, and I taped all of them. I loved all of them. King of Kings, I do like very much. So it was directed by Nicholas Ray, who's best known for as the director of Rebel Without a Cause. This is a very different movie from that, obviously. So this was released in 1961. It was a couple of years before the release of The Greatest Story Ever Told, which I've talked about in a previous video. Both films are very, very different, even though they're both like big budget Hollywood takes on the same source material. The Greatest Story Ever Told has a very kind of, I guess, a sort of a pious sort of stateliness to it, a very kind of it's kind of like a ghostly, muted sort of feel to it, like very reverent. Whereas King of Kings is much more like in the tradition of Hollywood, Technicolor, very lurid, very sensationalistic biblical epic. So this feels much closer to the likes of the Ten Commandments, Ben Hur, Quo Vadis, The Robe, that sort of thing. It feels it's a little bit more campy in some respects. But so this movie, it stars Jeffrey Hunter as Jesus Christ. We see him there, who's best known probably as Captain Christopher Pike in the original pilot episode for TV Star Trek. He was replaced by William Shatner, of course. His other big screen role was in The Searchers, the John Wayne movie. So Jeffrey Hunter's casting in this movie, it did cause a bit of, there were sort of giggles in the industry at the time. The movie was actually sneeringly referred to as I Was a Teenage Jesus, because of Jeffrey Hunter being a hunky matinee idol type. But I mean, he was the same age as the historical Jesus was at this time. Like, he was in his 30s. He wasn't a teenager. There was a 1927 movie called The King of Kings, note the use of the definite article, that was directed by Cecil B. DeMille. Despite the fact that the 1961 and 1927 movies both have similar titles and are both movies about the life of Jesus Christ, the 61 version is not really a remake of the 27 version. They're both very different. The 1961 version has a lot more to do with subplots involving Barabbas and King Herod and John the Baptist, and it's very different from. I think the 1927 version is like basically begins in the last week of Jesus' life. Like, it doesn't really have anything like the 1961 version begins with the invasion of Israel by the Roman Empire, and it has like the birth of Jesus, and it goes throughout his whole life and ministry. It's not just the last week. It's not just the trial and the crucifixion, etc. I think King of Kings, it has sort of a similar problem in some respects to a problem that The Greatest Story Ever Told has, which is that the supporting characters who are sort of more morally ambivalent, there's more shades and more dimensions to them than there is to Jesus, so they end up being more entertaining to watch. I mean, in The Greatest Story Ever Told, I feel that the best sequences are the scenes between John the Baptist, played by Charlton Heston, and Herod Antipas, played by Jose Ferrer. And the same sort of thing comes up in this, like the sequences between John the Baptist, who's played by Robert Ryan, and Herod Antipas, who's played by the Australian actor Frank Thring, are really good. The stuff involving Herd Hatfield as a kind of vain, aloof Pontius Pilate is good. Ron Randall, another Australian actor who plays the Roman centurion Lucius, he's good in this. And there's the sort of the co-lead of this movie is Harry Gardino as Barabbas. Harry Gardino, you might remember him as Harry Callahan's police chief in the very first Dirty Harry movie. So he plays Barabbas, the Jewish zealot who's fighting against Roman occupation. And the movie it has this sort of like contrasting thing between the message of Jesus and the message of Barabbas, and their methods, like rebels against the establishment, but in very different ways. One of my observations about the movie King of Kings is that if you just look at the stuff involving the Jewish zealots versus the Romans, like the action sequences, this is actually it's actually like a fantastic 1960s action movie. Like, the battle scenes are really, really good. So if you just if you skip past the Jesus material and just watch the Romans and the Jews wailing on each other, it might be a more enjoyable movie. Although I do like the Jesus stuff. I mean, Jeffrey Hunter, he's not I don't know if he's really he has that kind of blonde, blue-eyed, Nordic, kind of colorless interpretation of Jesus Christ. I mean, he's very much the hunky Hollywood Jesus, more so than a realistic, first century Palestinian Jew. But he's okay. But it's really the supporting cast that make this movie. I think Rip Torn plays Judas in this. He's really good. He begins as one of Barabbas's minions, and he defects to Jesus, and then it's like he betrays Jesus because he wants to sort of force Jesus' hand, and he thinks that if he serves Jesus up to the authorities, then Jesus will establish his authority, which, as we all know, that doesn't happen. The screenplay by Philip Yordan is actually surprisingly good for a movie of this kind. Interestingly, the movie's opening narration, which plays over the sequences depicting the Roman conquest of Israel, was written by Ray Bradbury and narrated by Orson Welles. The music score by Miklos Rozsa is absolutely fantastic. Miklos Rozsa he was one of the best composers of the classic Hollywood era. The movie was produced by Samuel Bronston, who sort of lives on in infamy. He was parodied in the 1977 sketch comedy movie, the Kentucky Fried Movie, as Samuel L. Bronkowitz. Yeah, this is a movie that I've seen many times, and it's flawed, but it's still a good movie. I feel. Interestingly, this movie came out in 1961. The Greatest Story Ever Told was released in 1965, and in between them, there was a small scale European version of The Life of Christ, Pier Paolo Pasolini's The Gospel According to St. Matthew, which was released in 1964. And of the three movies, the Pasolini film is the one that was most critically received the most critical praise, and is probably these days regarded, as the best of those three movies, even though it was made on a minuscule budget with amateur actors. This is a 1984 Japanese laserdisc from Warner Home Video. Okay, so Peter Hyams was responsible for directing two of the best and I feel most underrated science fiction films of the 1980s. In 1984, he directed the 2001: A Space Odyssey sequel, 2010, and before that, a few years before that, in 1981, he directed this movie, Outland, sci-fi, sort of a hard sci-fi movie, which I think is really fantastic. It's a sort of it's like a space western. It doesn't really hide the fact it's pretty much a remake of High Noon, except it's set on the Io, the moon of Jupiter, and it stars Sean Connery as a sort of a space marshal who's sent in to invest. It's like a mining colony where the miners are sort of going insane, and he sort of gets caught up in a conflict, and there's no one that'll help him, and all this stuff goes on. It's a really good movie. Sean Connery is really good in this. Peter Boyle is in this. Who else is in this? Frances Sternhagen is a really good supporting role as Sean Connery's only ally. And it's interesting because she's a middle-aged woman in this. If they made this movie today, there's no way that character would be a middle-aged woman. It'll probably be someone much younger and more glamorous. Stephen Burkhoff and James B. Sicking are in this as well. Yeah, so it's got really good special effects, really good story, really good acting. I really like this film. Yeah, I sort of have a thing for science fiction movies where it was that era when the special effects were good enough to be convincing on screen, but they were still practical effects, like the opticals. You still had actual sets and matte paintings and stuff, whereas these days it's all CGI, which I'm not going to get into a rant about that, but I sort of feel that there's a physicality to sort of the effects and the visuals of science fiction films like Outland, which will unfortunately we don't really see anymore. This film also has a really good music score by the terrific Jerry Goldsmith, who's always reliably excellent. There have been a couple of adaptations of Outland. There was a novelization by Alan Dean Foster, which I haven't read, and it's weird that I don't have it because I'm a big fan of Alan Dean Foster's movie novelizations, his science fiction stuff. He did novelizations for Star Wars, Aliens, Alien 3, The Thing. I think he also did Starman. He's really good, so I need to get that. And there was also a comic book adaptation in 1982 by Jim Steranko, the very widely acclaimed comic book writer artist Jim Steranko. He did it for Heavy Metal magazine, and it's supposed to be really good. If it's anywhere near as good as Heavy Metal magazine's comic adaptation of Alien, the one by Archie Goodwin and Walt Simonson, then it would be it would definitely be worth getting. Gary Newman released an album in 1991 titled Outland, a sort of electropop, jazzy science fiction concept album. It contains vocal samples from several 1980s science fiction action movies like Blade Runner, The Terminator, Predator. Although, funnily enough, I don't think there are any samples from Outland in there, but, it doesn't matter. It's still a really good album. The title track, Outland, I particularly like. So that is it. One box, 40 movies. I can't help but feel a dubious sense of accomplishment, rifling through all these. Is this the end? I would like to say yes, but knowing me, I probably will end up acquiring more laserdiscs and succumbing to the urge to wave them around and talk about them and then upload it. So yeah, I'm sorry.